Hello everyone and welcome to a 48th Annual Sun and Fun International Expo. I'm Ben Coleman, your anchor host for the Florida Aviation Network. We're coming to you live and in the clear from the Central Florida Aerospace Academy here at Lakeland Linder International Airport. And we are literally in the Academy. And again, thank you for James C. Ray Foundation, Mr. Ray was a very benevolent person, helped the school come to pass, and it's on the map as far as aviation goes, and for a high school, literally a high school for aviation and aerospace. The Florida Aviation Network is a complete volunteer-run organization, and we bring to you safety-oriented productions. And hopefully you'll learn from these productions something, you'll take something away. I don't care what it is, even if I never want to do that, I never want to watch this again. We hopefully don't say that, but we do have folks here that help us make ourselves much safer as we operate in and out of this system, which is needed every day. But today we do have Mr. Gary Reeves. Gary.
Good to see you, Ben.
Welcome back
to
Florida Aviation Network.
Good to see you again.
You've been here many times,
yeah,
and hopefully many times more. But
I hope so.
Gary, I've had a really hard time. I just get so tired making decisions. I really do. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, just let your wife do it.
Okay. So
you'll be happier, she'll be happier.
I don't have to make any more decisions?
Yep. So that'll wrap up the interview then.
Decision fatigue. What can you tell me about that from PilotSafety.org?
So it's a really interesting science, and I got interested in this. I lost a lot of good friends in aviation accidents, so I started PilotSafety.org. I have a goal. I just want to reduce GA accidents to 0. I want no fatalities. So I started reading the accident reports, and you know, really smart people and really great national magazines have always said the biggest killers of pilots are stall spin and VFR into IMC and engine failure and fuel exhaustion. And I found out that's not quite right. So I kind of locked in on this. Well, the only difference in the thousands of accident reports that I've studied were the only difference between a live pilot and a dead pilot were if they declared a mayday before they had the emergency. And that's what I thought was the silver bullet. And I was right, and I was on it. And then I found out, well, that's not quite it either. VFR and IMC, stall spins, engine failure on takeoff, all of the classic these kill pilots don't actually kill pilots. It's actually an end stage of something called decision fatigue. And there's some fascinating science, but I'll give you the very short version. You get about 100 good decisions a day, and they're mostly used up by 11 a.m. The quality of your critical decisions in the frontal cortex goes down rapidly depending on how long you've been awake, and it starts at about 6 hours. And they really deteriorate if you have to make decisions quickly or a lot of decisions, and they completely destroy any logical thought if there's any hormone called adrenaline released into the cortex that's caused by stress or fear.
So Gary, you're telling me that the average person has about 100 decisions a day, and most of them are used up by 11 o'clock in the morning.
Correct.
You're talking about decisions like, do I want coffee or tea? Is that a decision to make?
No, and
do I want to put on my shoes first or my socks first?
And that is something really successful people have in common. So what I like to ask people is, what do President Obama, Mark Zuckerberg, and Steve Jobs have in common? They never...
Let's not get political.
No. They never pick out clothes. In all President Obama's interviews on this subject, he has gray suits and blue suits that are identical, and he didn't even pick the color. He just picks the first one there. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg, he always wears that same gray shirt. Steve Jobs had 800 black turtleneck sweaters. The smartest people on the planet don't hold business meetings after 11 a.m., and they don't waste one of their good decisions picking out clothes. So if you, every morning, you have to decide if you want coffee or tea. If you just pick one and never think about it again, that'll save a good decision for later. Which kind of leads me into the multitasking. Have you ever heard that you need to be good at multitasking to be a pilot?
I've heard that before.
Have you ever heard that women are better at multitasking than men?
I've heard that before.
Well, that's not actually a high prize. I'm better at driving a car than my dog. That's not a high achievement. Women are better at everything than men, right? But so when I started going into science, I found that multitasking is actually not physically possible. The human brain cannot do two tasks at once. It's physically impossible. So there was a fascinating study in France where they used something called functional MRI. And they scanned the frontal cortex of volunteers, and they gave them two simple tasks to do at the same time. And the MRI showed the left side of the brain would light up, then there's a delay, and the right side of the brain would light up. And then there's a delay in the left. So human beings can't actually multitask. They do something called task switching. And every time you switch back and forth from one task to another, there's a delay and a little deficit buildup that causes errors. And that's just doing two things. Now let's be a pilot. Listening to a radio, looking at a GPS, watching an engine temperature, checking weather, programming autopilots, that actually increases decision fatigue and errors. So if you look at any good accident report, I think the most famous one is JFK Jr. And people go, well, JFK Jr. did all these dumb things, and I'm a smart pilot, and I'll never do those dumb things. The problem is he was a good pilot too, and he was very smart, and a good pilot would still make all those dumb errors. He didn't wake up in the morning and go, I want to die today, and I want to kill my wife and my sister-in-law. He had been awake for a long time. He was under pressure to continue, so the get there-itis is actually not a thing. The first sign of decision fatigue and failing logic circuits in the brain is the inability to change plans. So why would a really good pilot take off into known bad weather with a cast on his foot and continue to fly into bad weather? That's actually the early signs of decision fatigue. You can't change plans. Right. And then it gets worse very quickly.
How do we practice our way out of that?
Well, amazingly enough, it's something that's been taught in aviation for years. Written checklist is one of the keys. So if you pre-flight your plane by memory, you're actually doing a lot of decisions. If you follow a written checklist, you're not using up the resource. So what I tell everybody is, if you've ever flown with a Garmin GPS, the great things, right? Garmin GPS has the ability to put in a timer. So does an Aviation FMS. I want every student to, every 30 minutes, have a ding go off, like the Pavlov dog, and every 30 minutes you run a cruise written checklist. Doing that actually eliminates a lot of decision fatigue. And then the other thing is, there's two other simple steps. Do as much planning as possible before you get. So do you remember the FAA rule about you have to pick an alternate airport, right? It was based on, we didn't have good weather at the time, and it was like a 1, 2, 3 rule. An hour before to an hour after your destination, if the visibility was less than 3 miles or the ceiling was below 2,000, you were supposed to pick an alternate. Because we didn't have good weather. We didn't know what the weather was going to be like in 3 hours when we got to Oakland. So it made sense to make sure we could get to another airport with a 45-minute reserve. But can I ask you a true-false question?
Ask me, and I'll try to give you a true-false answer.
True or false, men? If everybody that ever died attempting a low IFR approach in bad weather to minimums, true or false, they would have lived if they'd stopped in good weather halfway before they got into bad weather?
But they landed, and the car that was taking them to the FBO got in a wreck. And
now you're yes. But
so, no,
right?
I see where you're going with it. No, chances are they would not have been killed shooting the approach in bad weather below minimums. So
right. So what happens is at the end stage of decision fatigue, then this is what actually kills people. If there's any fear or stress, like going missed approach in bad weather for real, which most pilots don't do very often, they actually don't divert to their alternate. They actually retry the same approach. We had a guy in McKinney, Texas, try the same ILS approach 7 times before he died. And the performance is not improving. So what I want to do is I want to teach people your IFR alternate should be halfway to your destination while you're still in good weather. Because we have better technology. We have ForeFlight and XM and ADS-B weather. Stop before you get into bad weather. And there is one more great way to prevent the adrenaline paralysis decision fatigue accident. Run a written checklist on yourself. There's an app from the FAA called FRAT, Flight Risk Assessment Tool. And it's a lot of fun. You just put in your qualifications, and then you tell it about your flight. So if you're a commercial pilot with 400 hours, and you own your own Saratoga, and you did an IFR and a flight review 6 months ago, and the new equipment was 8 months ago, so you got some training from a local instructor, would you have any qualms about leaving after a full day at Sun and Fun and flying 3 hours to your own home airport at night? No. Right?
It depends on how much beer I'd had that day.
Well, that's true. That's true, right? Or how much sugar-free Red Bull I'd had.
Okay.
But I don't think anybody would think that's a dangerous thing. But if your home airport is a mountain airport with a 1,900-foot overcast with light rain, and it's a 9-knot crosswind, and the only approach available is a non-precision circling approach, still, everybody goes, well, I've done that.
Well, you're stacking the deck.
And your wife has to be home tomorrow, and you have to be there tonight. But you don't see it, because that's kind of always the pressure on a good pilot, right? But when you do this FRAT app, and again, it's from the FAA, and it's called Flight Risk Assessment Tool. It's a little blue icon. And I think it's like $3. When you put all of these things in the FRAT app, the risk factor at the top starts green, and then it moves into the yellow, and then it moves into the red. And if you do the scenario I gave you, it starts flashing red. So the biggest sign of decision fatigue is your inability to stop. The FRAT app goes, stop. Using that outside perspective is one of the best ways to prevent fatal accidents.
Well, and the truth to that is it's so sad. I don't know, Gary, if you realize I've been involved in accident investigation a lot in my year. And I cannot tell you the times that we go out on weather-related accidents, fatalities, where the weather was so bad when they had the accident. We usually arrive the next day.
Right.
It's blue sky.
Sure.
Nice weather. Why didn't they just wait one day? One day, was it so important that they had to get there? They couldn't wait one day. It would have cost a hotel room. I would have paid for their hotel room.
Right.
Okay? Just don't. Anyway, I'm on to what you're putting down.
Right, and that's where kind of the myth of something called get there itis started. Because everybody went, well, they were under pressure to get there. It's actually not that. That's decision fatigue. Because if the brain wasn't tired and they hadn't made 3,000 decisions that day and they weren't under pressure, any reasonable pilot would go, well, I would never do that. But once you're suffering from decision fatigue, you're not reasonable anymore. So how many pilots did you look at and went, they knew it was bad weather and they kept coming? That's decision fatigue. And that's one of the reasons I wrote my book.
How's the book been doing?
You know, my single pilot IFR pro tips, which has nothing to do with check ride preps. What really good instructors teach and what really good examiners test for is different than how to fly in the real world. But the second chapter is all about decision fatigue, and the response has been amazing. The first book dropped here at Sun and Fun last year. We'd sold 500 copies before the print hit, and we're currently averaging about 500 copies a month. And it's been really well received. because it's a new way of looking at things. You know, there's so many great IFR authors already out there, but it's a new way. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, $500 a month in this industry, I mean, it's a small industry.
Yeah.
I mean, per capita. $500 a month is a pretty good number.
Yeah, and you know, it's a $29 book. Yeah, it's not a huge investment. Yeah.
But it's what else do you have going on?
Well, PilotSafety.org is the actual sponsor of the forums, and we're teaching 2 great classes tomorrow. At 9 a.m., I'm teaching IFR Made Easy, 10 simple steps that really good pilots and really good instrument instructors can take to reduce workload and decision fatigue. And then the class that is my passion, the one that just, I'm so excited I can't sleep at nights.
Tell me, please tell me.
The biggest cause of pilot accidents, it's not what you think, and it's an hour deep drill into the decision fatigue and adrenaline paralysis. And it is so much fun because we actually do exercises with the audiences, prove multitasking is not possible. It's a great class.
And adrenaline paralysis.
Yeah.
That's, people respond and act differently, do they not, when the adrenaline is flowing?
Yeah. So I think I told you last time, 1 billion years ago, I used to be a paramedic. Have you ever seen a child choking or a car accident where all these spectators do nothing to help? And everybody actually makes fun of them on Facebook. Well, why didn't you go help? They couldn't physically move. That's actually called adrenaline paralysis. So the mom does nothing to do to help the choking child. The spectators do nothing to help the child because they're not trained. You see it every day. It's the only problem with this subject, Ben, is I'm not sleeping, and I've already started writing my next book. Yeah.
Your 3 simple things. Tell me about 3 simple things. How are we going to prevent accidents using 3 simple things?
The 3 simple steps to reduce decision fatigue and save pilot lives. Written checklist, never flows, never memories. Now, when I say never flows, you do the flow, and then did I miss anything on the checklist, right? So sometimes you don't have time for written checklists. Flows work, especially quickly in emergencies. But if people used written checklists for every phase of flight, if people marked up their charts and planned to stop in good weather before going into known bad weather, and people use the FAA FRAT app, I think we could reduce GA fatalities by 30 or 50% in the first 12 months.
I don't disagree. And I am going to pull up that FRAT app. I've not used
awesome.
it. But, Gary, I want to ask you to help me with something.
Sure. You're
a checklist guy.
Yes, I am.
Do you know what the landing checklist looks like on most aircraft?
Well, I know the one I use.
But it's a landing checklist where you're downwind, gear down.
Right.
Your target speed on turning base.
Sure.
Established on final. Airspeed over the numbers. Touchdown speed target.
Right.
That's the landing checklist. But what happens when you're coming over the numbers and there's a car on the runway? What do you do?
And that is the decision fatigue, and that's when people lock up.
Why don't we just go around?
It's not on the checklist.
Oh my goodness. So let's rename the landing checklist to be the go-around checklist. You've already made up your decision that I'm going to go around. Unless everything is perfect, I'm stabilized, the runway's clear, I feel good, airspeed's in the right spot. Let's call it the go-around checklist.
Yeah, and I love that. I will absolutely take that idea and pretend it's my own and sell it.
Steal it.
In a pink label, of course. So I actually have an appeal to the flight instructors that teach primary. Flight instructors, when you're teaching primary and you're doing pattern, and you know how a flight instructor, you can kind of save any bad landing. Don't. Instead of trying to get 10 landings in an hour, I think we could save, my Apple Watch, I think we could save a lot of lives if 5 out of those 10 were, this is not a stable landing, go around. I think if flight instructors at the basic level taught go arounds as normal and the landing as the exception, that idea you had, the go-around checklist, and renamed it,
Yeah.
I think we'd save a lot of lives.
Because there's so many people that try to salvage a bad position, and during the investigation, well, tell us what happened. Well, I was a little bit out of position, and I really wanted to. My intent was to land the airplane. Well, did you land it? Oh, I landed it all right. Sure collapsed it, went off the runway, bent the wing, made a mess. Well, what could have prevented that? I guess it should have gone around. So,
you know what happened to me? I think I had about 3,000 hours. I thought I was a pretty good instructor. It was my 4th lesson of the day. It was a guy with about 1,000 hours. I was just checking him out in a 182 RG. I said, we're going to do short field takeoffs and landings. And he goes, okay. And the first 3 short field takeoffs and landings from him were just awful. Mm-hmm. But I was so tired. And I said, okay, we're going to do it again. And I don't actually teach touch and goes. I don't like touch and goes because they're rushed. Mm-hmm. I want full stop. So we take off, and I said, okay, BCTF gumps, boost pump, cowl flaps, trim, gas, undercarriage. As I said the word undercarriage, Long Beach Tower interrupted me. Said, traffic, okay, fine. So we turned downwind, and I start a written checklist. Boost pump, cowl flaps, undercarriage. As I say the word under, ATC interrupts me. Extend downwind, we'll call your base. Fine. Okay, boost pumps, cowl flaps, because you got to restart the checklist. As I said the word under, I didn't even get carriage out. ATC says, turn base now, short final, clear to land. Mm-hmm. And I actually said these words. My controls, darn it, I'm going to show you how to do a good short field landing.
Oh boy, I see where this is going.
And I did, Ben. It was the best short field landing. This is why I won the National Instructor of the Year. In 2019 they gave me the plaque. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know this, it's because I demonstrated the best short field landing ever on the planet. I said, I'm going to touch down on the top of the numbers, and I did, and I stopped a 182 in about 12 feet using the very advanced propeller braking system.
Yeah, and it works.
And the safety team came out, and they're like, well, why didn't you put the gear down? And I'm like, I don't know. I was using written checklist. Yeah. The gear warning system was inoperative. I didn't know that. But that's fatigue. Yeah. So if I had that in my mind, that I wasn't running a before landing checklist, but a before go around, you would have saved me some embarrassment.
Well, let's do it sometime.
I think that's great.
Gary, thanks for joining us here today.
Ben, always a pleasure.
And we will talk again sometime. And I guess I need to buy a book. Can I have $29.95 from somebody? Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, I'll bill Obi.
Okay, bill Obi. He's got a lot of money.
Great.
Folks, thanks you for joining us again on this interview. And we have got some more interviews coming. Maybe not today, but stay tuned for tomorrow. Ben Coleman, your anchor host here for the Florida Aviation Network. We'll see you next interview.